How's it going, my friend? It is Danny here from foxohealth.com, and in this video I'm going to talk about inflammation. So let's jump in. So the more I learn about health and longevity in general, the more I keep coming across this term inflammation. So it seems like there is an association between inflammation and disease and things going badly down the line. So I thought it worth getting an understanding of it and doing a video about inflammation. So what is inflammation? So when I used to think of inflammation, I used to think of something like a swollen ankle. Now that's not incorrect, but obviously there's a lot more to it than that. Now it turns out there's two main types of inflammation. One is acute inflammation, and number two is low-level chronic inflammation. So let's talk about acute inflammation first of all. So acute inflammation is an acute response of the innate immune system which happens when you, for example, cut yourself. And it's very destructive and it kills non-specifically using some heavy weapons and heavy artillery like hydrogen peroxide, which is found in bleach. Now that's very strong and it has to die down after a couple of days, otherwise our tissues would just fall apart because it's just too damaging. And that's where the adaptive immune system takes over and kills more specifically. So what I just described there is the acute inflammation. That's the first type of inflammation. Now the second type of inflammation is low-level chronic inflammation. Low-level chronic inflammation. So low-level chronic inflammation seems to be associated to a lot of diseases out there, and there seems to be an association between poor health and low-level chronic inflammation. Now, having low levels of low-level chronic inflammation has been associated to living well and having a nice, long, healthy life. Now, low-level chronic inflammation is similar to acute inflammation in many of the weapons are the same, but they're used at a much lower level. They kind of dumbed it down a bit there, so the damage isn't as great initially. But the thing about low-level chronic inflammation is that it can persist over time. It's insidious and it kind of builds up. So it's causing slowly damage to our tissues and damage to our cells and damage to our DNA. And that's where the disease comes out, because it builds up over time, usually later in life. So that's low-level chronic inflammation. That's a second type. So that's the key inflammation that we need to worry about. So what causes low-level chronic inflammation? So I've done a lot of research on this one. It has been quite hard to find the reasons, and I found four possible reasons, which I'll talk about now. Now, the first reason could be due to senescent cells. Okay, it could be due to senescent cells. So what are senescent cells? So senescent cells are sometimes referred to as zombie cells because they're still alive, they can't really die, but they no longer serve their purpose. They're not healthy cells, and they just kind of hang around in the system and they secrete molecules. And some of those molecules are positive, but a lot of them are harmful, and they actually cause this, they cause this inflammation in the body, this low-level chronic inflammation. So senescent cells could be a key reason. Now, senescent cells tend to start to appear later in life, in your 40s and 50s and beyond, and again they accumulate, and because they can't be killed, obviously you're accumulating these senescent cells, you're getting more of these molecules, these harmful molecules that are being secreted by them, and it's causing more of this inflammation, causing more of a problem as you get older. Okay, so that's the first potential reason of low-level chronic inflammation, it's senescent cells. The second potential reason of low-level chronic inflammation is leaky guts. Okay, leaky guts. So what is leaky gut? So I'll give a very broad overview in as far as I understand it. So I'm sure you're aware when we eat something, the food is digested within our intestine, and the intestine actually has a single layer of cells surrounding it called the epithelial cells, and they're actually all joined together very tightly by what's called tight junctions, but sometimes we actually get holes in those tight junctions, and that's called leaky gut. Now, unfortunately, those holes can actually allow things to pass from the intestine into the bloodstream that aren't meant to pass, so harmful substances like bacteria, for example, and that could be thought to actually cause this inflammation. So that's the second reason, potentially, the second potential reason for low-level chronic inflammation, it's a leaky gut. Now, the third potential reason for low-level chronic inflammation is when we get our LDL cholesterol particles stuck in our artery walls and oxidized. So cholesterol is a very complex subject, and I don't pretend to understand it, so I won't go into too much detail, but from the reading I've done, it seems like that could be a potential driver of inflammation, is when LDL cholesterol, there's various types of cholesterol, but one is called LDL cholesterol, when it gets stuck in our artery walls, and again, don't ask me why that happens, I'll probably talk about that in another video. When it gets stuck in there, it gets oxidized, and that actually causes the inflammation. So that's a potential third driver of the low-level chronic inflammation. Now, the fourth driver, potentially, is said to be due to poor oral hygiene, which is a surprising one. So poor oral hygiene. So apparently if we don't floss, even just for a couple of days, then obviously food gets stuck between our teeth, and that will actually cause additional bad bacteria to form in our mouth that's not supposed to be there, and potentially that bacteria gets into our bloodstream and causes havoc and causes this inflammation. So that's potentially the fourth driver of inflammation, is poor oral hygiene. Okay, so that's all the drivers. So I'll do a quick recap of the video and then we'll call it a day. So remember, there's two types of inflammation, the two main types. Number one is acute inflammation. That's an acute response of the innate immune system that happens when we cut ourselves. And number two is that low-level chronic inflammation, where a lot of the same weapons are used to destroy the invaders, but it happens more insidiously over time at lower levels, but it does build up and keep going, so it causes disease in the future. So those are the two main types of inflammation. Now the possible four drivers for that are: number one, the zombie cells or the senescent cells. Number two, it's the leaky gut. Number three, it's the LDL cholesterol particles. Sorry, I said earlier that there's a type of cholesterol called LDL cholesterol. There's only one cholesterol, but it's wrapped in LDL. So if that gets stuck in our artery walls, it gets oxidized, and that can cause inflammation. And then the fourth reason is the poor oral hygiene, when we get additional bacteria in our mouth that shouldn't be there, that can get into our bloodstream, etc., and cause the inflammation. Okay, so that was the video. Hope you enjoyed it. Please give it a thumbs up if you did. It'll help me grow the channel. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this one, and until the next time, please take care.